Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Gabor Lukács. I'm the President of Air Passenger Rights, and this is your Sunday afternoon update on air passenger rights. I'm going to wait to hear from our wonderful team of volunteers whether the signal is okay, whether you can hear audio and video, and then we are going to start right away. So, Martin and Dominic, how is the audio and the video? Looks good, audio is good. Thank you, Terry. So, as usual, I would like to thank our team of volunteers, Terry, who just joined us apparently online, and Christine and Dominic and Martin, who are constantly helping us to deal with the vast amount of traffic and the vast amount of questions in this group. And without them, I don't think I would be able to get any sleep or get anything done. So we are very, very grateful to them. And the first issue that I promised to discuss is a brief update on what is happening with the class actions. I'm just going to see here what's happening. Okay, so we have about 60 people watching. That's great. So the first topic is an update on the class action. I also would like to help you to see how you can do this basic check yourself. So we are going now to move to the website of the federal court, and let me just open it here as well. And in the website of the federal court, we can scroll down here to search by court case number. This is the number of the class action, T428-20. Press submit, and after a short moment, the class action, this is the federal court class action, is coming up. I'm now going to click on the RE, that's the records that are available. We're going to get now a long list of records. This is the latest entry. This is from June 24th. And let's try to decipher it. This was held in Ottawa online before the Honorable Justice Lafreniere, and the court was dealing with a case management conference. The result is reasons to follow, because as I understand, the reasons or the proper written direction hasn't been issued yet. But what has already been confirmed is that the certification motion tentatively set for October 28th, 29th, and 30th via video conference or Zoom. So I would like just to say two words about what a certification motion is. A certification motion is the procedure where the court decides that a class action is actually an appropriate procedure for dealing with the issues raised. And it is also the procedure by which the court certifies the class and decides who should and who shouldn't be included in the class. So a number of you have asked me, okay, but how do we know whether we are in or we are not? And the answer is that it is the certification motion that finalizes if the class action is certified, who is in the class, who is included. Even after a class action has been certified, you can choose to opt out. That is an option that if someone thinks they have a very good case and therefore they prefer to litigate the case themselves, they can do that. But Canada is not an opt-in, but rather an opt-out type of jurisdiction. So once a class action has been certified, everybody is in who is member of the class as defined by the court, but only those are excluded who specifically choose to say, no, I want to sue myself. So this is the update we have so far. It is good news because we got a quite quick date for a certification motion. We are talking about just 4 months from now, which may look like an eternity if you are missing the money right now. But in terms of court proceedings, it is super fast, and it demonstrates that the court is very much aware of the urgency of this matter. The court is aware that people are out of money, that people need the money as soon as possible, and the court is making time for it accordingly. The next important development I would like to talk to you about, and it was something I don't think we listed officially on our agenda, but certainly merits some discussion, is the latest policy published by Air Canada about long delays and cancellations from the European Union. So let's get a bit closer to it and try to make sense of it. So this is something that Air Canada published on their website very recently. The date seems to be the 15th of June inside the file, so it's something very, very, very recent. And maybe we should even make it a bit bigger so it will be legible. So if my computer is going to cooperate. Just a moment, forgive me for a moment. It's something doesn't want to cooperate here. No. It's probably here. Okay, let's try it again. So here's the file, and let's try to make it now a bit bigger. Yeah, let's get it closer. Okay, and oops. And here we are. So this is the Air Canada notice. It relates to, and this comes to the interesting part. This relates to flights that are departing the European Union, Switzerland, and Iceland. So a quite controversial part of this document and what it means has been that Air Canada claims that this policy is applicable only to passengers who are starting their travel from the European Union. In other words, if you have a, say, Frankfurt, Toronto round-trip ticket, Air Canada will say, because you started out in Canada, not in the European Union, this policy doesn't apply to you. But actually, when you look at what they wrote as opposed to what they say, it says very clearly that this applies to flights operated by Air Canada departing from the European Union, Switzerland, and Iceland. So what Air Canada did here is that they have written something down that complies with the European Union's regulations, because this is what the European regulation says. If you have any flight that is departing from the European Union's territory to anywhere in the world, then the European regulations will apply. And so what they say then here is that they will actually be issuing refunds under the European regulations if your flight is delayed by 3 hours or your flight is canceled. So what they put here, I'm going to maybe make it a bit bigger. Let's zoom in there. So what they have here, it is perfectly correct. It matches the European regulations text, as does the requirement that it refers to flights departing from the European Union. The mischief is in Air Canada claiming that this applies only if you effectively bought a ticket in the European Union. So only if you are starting out your trip from the European Union and not from Canada. Air Canada's position here is devoid of any merit. The European law has been perfectly clear that what matters is not where your itinerary starts, but rather where your flight departs from. So if you have a round-trip ticket bought in Canada and the European segment, the segment which departs from the European Union, is cancelled, you do have a right to get a refund under those European regulations and under actually what Air Canada wrote. If you are facing some resistance, this document can be used very well to actually force Air Canada to issue a refund through a chargeback, or quite possibly contacting the national enforcement body in the European Union of the country, of the state from which your flight is supposed to depart. What you need to remember is that you are entitled to a refund of all segments. So if your flight departing from the European Union is cancelled, then the right here is to let me highlight it, is a refund of the full cost of your ticket at the price at which it was purchased for the parts of the journey not made. So if you did not make any parts of the journey, then even though you had a flight from Canada to Europe and then back, you have to get a refund for each and every part if the Europe-Canada part is cancelled. If you have already flown to Europe and you got stranded there, then of course you get a refund only for the return portion if you have already used part of the ticket. This is an important development because it shows yet again that the European Union, unlike Canada, is enforcing the laws. They are actually doing their job. They are doing what is needed to bring Air Canada into compliance. And now the question remains how to deal with this nonsense that we are seeing in Air Canada's verbal communication. And we have seen some screenshots in the group where people attempted to obtain a refund based on this, where Air Canada is just misstating their very own policy. And the answer is complain to the European regulator, to European national enforcement bodies, and do chargebacks. I was asked in the meantime a question about what happens if the judge decides not to certify the class action. Well, there are many reasons why a class action would not be certified. It could not be certified. It depends what the reasons are. Generally, a certification motion does not preclude you from suing yourself. A class action is a matter of procedure, not of substance. So the kind of arguments that we are expecting to hear from the airlines is somehow saying that the federal courts have no jurisdiction, that these cases too suffused, there are too many moving parts to be able to deal with through a class action. They will throw all sort of things at the judge, but at the same time, the court will have to consider what is more efficient, to deal with it in a single proceeding or have millions of people sue in small claims court and federal court and every possible court. I anticipate that on this issue of judicial economy, the class action will be certified. In terms of jurisdiction, there are some interesting questions there, but I don't think that the airlines are having much traction with their arguments. I think they are barking up the wrong tree. As I understand the law, aeronautics have been and remain a federal jurisdiction since 1932. There was an old case at the time when Canada's top court was not our Supreme Court, but actually the Privy Council. So the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, and bless their little hearts, they decided in 1932 that aeronautics is federal jurisdiction, and there have been a long line of aeronautics cases since then that confirmed that aeronautics is a federal jurisdiction, is something that is covered by federal authorities. So the Federal Courts Act contains a specific provision that grants federal courts jurisdiction to deal with aeronautics. And I'm quite confident that this certification motion is going to be successful. However, if it were not successful, there are still class actions in Quebec. There is a class action in the US against Air Canada, 2 of them actually. So I anticipate that both the airlines and the court will appreciate that the best they can achieve by not certifying a class action is just having it dealt with somewhere else. This is a problem that affects millions of passengers based on the numbers of refunds that are owed. We are talking about several billions of dollars. So if you divide it by $1,000 on average per passenger, we still see that we're dealing with a problem affecting millions of passengers. That problem is not going to go away either here or there, either in the US or in Canada, or in Ontario perhaps, or in BC Federal Provincial Superior Court, or in Quebec Provincial Superior Court, eventually the issue will have to be dealt with. So I'm not particularly worried. In terms of the next topic I wanted to talk to you about, I'm sure you have heard that Air Canada and WestJet are stopping to implement social distancing on board aircraft. I'm quite shocked by it because we hear from every health professional on this earth that social distancing is important. We are being told that we have to do social distancing on public transportation. For example, here in Halifax, they are blocking off seats to ensure some social distancing on the bus. And mind you, the bus has a window that can be opened, unlike the aircraft. We are even told to maintain social distancing outdoors. We have here nice signs, actually. We have here in Halifax some streets which have been designated as slow streets or slow traffic streets to allow people more opportunity to safely bike, to walk. And each of those signs remind people, keep 2-meter distance for everybody else. So when the healthcare officials, public health officials are telling us that it is so important to maintain 2 meters from everybody, even outdoors, I'm rather perplexed how possibly the airlines can justify not maintaining the same level of social distancing on board aircraft. Obviously, the problem is that airlines want profit. They want more money. They want to use the fact that they can now sell more seats to decrease prices, increase demand that way. But in my opinion, the airlines are putting passengers' lives at risk based on what I know so far. I would like to mention I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't want you to take what I'm saying as a medical opinion. Rather, it is simply using our common sense. If you need social distancing on buses, you need social distancing on airplanes. One more thing that I did just last night, I appreciate that kind of discussion we had, a little bit of back of the envelope calculation in terms of probabilities, in terms of what happens and how social distancing can actually be effective. So I want to leave you on this point with perhaps one point of food for thought. The reason that they want that every public health expert is recommending now social distancing is because of aerosol, because of particles from what one exhales from one's saliva that can be all spread around us. Now, we are dealing with some particles that spread in space. And depending on where you are sitting, you are going to be infected or not infected or exposed to the aerosol from someone else, even if they wear masks, based on the density in the air or in the surface where you are at the point where you are sitting. So I'm sure you have observed it with lights or with heat, anything that spreads in space and it spreads over a surface, that as you go farther and farther, the intensity decreases as a square of the distance. In other words, if you are spreading the same density of particles over a larger bowl, larger surface, the density per surface unit, which is a good approximation of what you may be inhaling from other people's aerosol, is going to decrease as a square of the distance. So in practical sense, what does it mean? It means that if you are sitting twice as far from someone as normally you would, it means that you are going to get only a quarter of the exposure to the aerosol that is coming out from them. It is not a perfect protection, but it shows that why social distancing is so powerful and important. Because on a plane, if you're say half a meter from someone, or you are 1.5 meters from someone, it is actually triple possibly of the distance, depending on how you sit. Maybe you just to the window and you go right away to the window, and they are at the aisle seat and they kind of move away from you. So you can reach maybe a meter and a half of distance, approximately, as opposed to half a meter when you are shoulder to shoulder with a passenger next to you. Typical sardine type of setup. So if you're able to actually implement a threefold increase in the distance, then the drop in the density of the aerosol where you are can be as much as 1/9 of what would be if you were sitting right next to them. I'm finding, based on those kind of considerations, and of course additional probabilistic considerations of how likely that someone will be sick on a larger aircraft which is full of passengers, I'm finding it very irresponsible what the airlines are doing. The airlines' main line of argument is that they are following IATA's advice, but IATA is an airline association. They are an association by the airlines, for the airlines, and they serve the airlines' private financial interests. There's nothing wrong with that, but they are not a health authority, not a public health expert. They are saying what is best for their business. What I would like to hear is from someone like Dr. Henry in British Columbia, or their counterparts across Canada from provincial experts commenting on this. What do they think? Do they actually believe that the same requirements that are necessary in terms of social distancing on buses are not needed on airplanes? I have not heard them say that. So by the same token, perhaps there is no need for social distancing at airports either. Those questions, I hope, are going to be asked by members of the media, from healthcare professionals, from public health professionals. We need answers to that. Until such time we have clear and convincing answers, I would say do not book any flights. It is not safe, not only now financially, but also in terms of your health. I'm wondering, now I'm seeing some problems. Some people had problems with the video, say that the video was interrupted, but it's back now. Is everything okay? Can you all see it, hear it? Just I'm waiting for a short response. It's possible it was just a lag, but I'm in the meantime, I would like to, Dominic is saying it's back now. I hope it was just an interruption and you didn't miss anything important. I've seen some questions I didn't manage to answer before, so let me go and answer those. Kathy was asking and about the European and Air Canada issues, Europe versus Canada. Is this the reason why Air Canada cancelling departing flights from Canada but not returning flights from the European Union? Kathy, that's a very good question. I suspect Air Canada is trying to delay cancelling flights from the European Union precisely to avoid the operation of the European regulations, but also because typically return flights are more into the future. So if you wait a bit longer, those things will get also cancelled, I suspect. Another question by Jess Tapper: the individual passenger can be fined by the police for not sticking to the rules. Yes, Jess, that's exactly the problem, that the airlines are now apparently not enforcing or not implementing what is recommended by public health professionals, but at the same time a passenger can be facing a fine for even apparently a quite minor violation or minor misunderstanding about it. I would like to see clarity on these issues. If it is safe to be as close as a person sitting shoulder to shoulder with you on an aircraft if you are wearing a mask, I would like to know why. What if both of you are eating? Then you're not even wearing a mask. There are lots of questions here that I'm very troubled by airlines not having answered, not having come clean about it, not having presented clear, convincing scientific evidence. And what also troubles me is that it seems that airlines are putting their profits ahead of your lives, of passengers' lives, and also ahead of the damage that a second outbreak, a second wave, can cause to the entire economy. So bottom line, If you can help it, don't fly. Next topic to discuss is back to our social media activism. I have a number of comments and news to share. The first one is that the videos that you put out are absolutely awesome. They are having an effect, they are being viewed by many people, and they are being noticed. So the videos where you actually tell the public, tell Canada how much each airline stole from you, they are garnering a lot of interest. Very well done, and keep developing it. Perhaps working on a better text if someone has an idea. I remember that in one post I've seen a suggestion to improve the script. Do it, work with whoever can help to create you better videos. I also want to mention that Jeffrey Reichman has been very kind in compiling videos of all kind of collections, taking smaller snippets from each of those videos that you posted and posting that. So I'm going to try to tag him in this. Yeah, here is. I'm going to try to tag Jeffrey Reichman, and if you can reach out to him, if you can maybe chat with him about it on over PM possibly, private messaging about how to do a better video, what he needs from you, or how you can help him, it would be terrific. He has been doing an amazing work in doing compilation of those videos, and we need more of those. There is nothing more convincing than you, with your face, with your voice, with your real case scenario, telling the public how you have been ripped off. There's a question here from Christine Melville. Did someone manage to get the statement from the CTA as referred to? So far, no. It was, I think, referred to actually in the CTV news item, where the CTA was actually complaining that they did not allow airlines not to provide refunds, and they were protesting about it for the first time. Very interesting turn of events. It may or may not be a sign of some internal politics happening within the government, realizing that they have done something clearly, obviously wrong, both legally and morally. That's yet to be seen. Other interesting development in the context of social media, and I'm going to pull up again that page. So I have a lot of things to tell you about social media stuff. Let me just fix the right window here. See this window? Okay, so let's switch there. So I created here a list of MPs for passenger rights. The way you can access it is by viewing Air Passenger Rights Twitter feed, and there under list you will find this. You can also follow this list, and I recommend that you follow this list because this is the aggregate list for those MPs who have shown support for passenger rights. And I would like to have a place where you can all view what they are saying, and hopefully they will continue to comment on passenger rights. That's what we expect, and that way their messaging to you becomes more easily accessible. I also would like to show you something that I was very pleasantly surprised because Transport Minister Marc Garneau has been blocking air passenger rights for a very long time on Twitter, and something between this week and last week seems to have changed because now we are not blocked. And I don't know what happened in the background, but my suspicion is that it was because of your efforts. You have been delivering a clear, convincing message that passenger rights in Canada matter, that there are many people on Twitter who care about passenger rights, and that Air Passenger Rights as an advocacy group is the main source for advocacy in this area. And I hope that that was the reason why Transport Minister Marc Garneau changed his mind and decided that actually he has to listen and he has to hear what we passengers, we Canadians, have to tell him about his misguided policies. What I would like to ask everyone is that as you have done before, keep the criticism professional, keep it polite. Certainly, I'm disagreeing with Transport Minister Marc Garneau vehemently on what he's doing on passenger rights, but no profanity, no offensive comments, no personal comments. Criticizing a minister for being economic with the truth is perfectly fine. He's supposed to be truthful, but the point is not to become a way of just, the purpose is not to harass anybody. The purpose is to call them out on their misguided policies and finding that kind of healthy line of not giving up what we believe, but at the same time remaining respectful is something very important. I also want to mention that I received a number of positive feedbacks about our Twitter campaign. It was noticed by a number of politicians. Some politicians actually reached out to me, and I'm hoping to speak to them next week. I'm not at liberty to name names at this point, but I can tell you that the fact that it is not simply Gabor Lukács standing on a barrel in the middle of a park and screaming passengers need a refund, but rather a chorus of passengers very vehemently demanding a refund, demanding justice for passengers is something that is making a big difference. So 3 takeaways before we move on to the next topic is, first thing is, please have a look at the lists under air passenger rights, and this list for MPs for passenger rights, maybe I'm even going to add a nice photo for it. This is something I would love if you followed. I see already one person following it. KA, I'm not sure who it is, but please add a photo for yourself. And the other takeaway is keep doing the videos. And the third thing I wanted to tell you about in our discussions is that when you are tweeting things out, some of the messages are great, but make sure that if you see a passenger who has a problem, you don't simply retweet their message, which is just a way of drawing attention of the world to their problem, but you also reply to them. So last time we discussed it, but I would like to go back again. Let's see, let's have a look at Air Canada's feed. So here's Air Canada's feed, tweets and replies. And, if we find here something that is in some way relevant to our situation, your refund system is a waste of time. We could not refund our flight via your website, so we called in. The agent said he had to elevate the issue to another team. Our flight then completely disappeared and we never received any confirmation for 10 days. What gives? So for example, this, I'm going to click, just again, this is the tweet that we would like to help this passenger. So what we can say is something like, click on the reply, first like it, then tweet a reply, and we are happy to help you in our Facebook group. And then I'm pasting here the link to the Facebook group. And we just referred one person to the right source where they can find reliable information. So don't forget that sometimes reply can be more efficient than retweeting. Where do we go from here? Next topic is some stuff about the US Department of Transportation. I'm going to pull up, this document was already posted earlier in the group, but I'm not sure how many of you have seen it, so I would like you to see it because it's very, very, very much telltale. Let's see, it's here. So this is the Air Travel Consumer Report published by the United States Department of Transportation. This is a document that they publish every month to summarize about the airline's performance. There are some flight delays, mishandled baggage, wheelchairs and scooters. They have some reports about that. But the most important part of this, and I'm going to magnify it a little bit, the most important part of this is how many complaints they have received. those consumer complaints is what we really care about. So let's have a look at how airlines are doing. And I've already checked that this is on page 48, so I'm going right to page 48. That's where foreign airlines are listed. It's a bit wide, but I'm going to try to help you to see this. So let's center it. So let's look at how our beloved national airline, Air Canada, is doing. So Air Canada, apparently, there are a total of 1,049 complaints. I'm going to maybe make it magnified a little bit. So there are 1,049 total complaints received about Air Canada by the US DOT. And just for the topic of refunds, there are 969 complaints received by the US Department of Transportation. Wow. But how does it measure up to other airlines? Perhaps Air Canada is only as bad as other airlines? Well, let's have a closer look. So the first figure I would like to look at is in the total. How many complaints about foreign airlines? It's about, I believe, 80, maybe 80 foreign airlines, close to 80. How many complaints did the DOT receive? So the numbers are here. The total is 9,374 in total. And about refunds, they received 7,568 complaints in total about all foreign airlines flying to and from the United States. So Air Canada accounts for more than 10% of those complaints in total, and close to about 1/7 of the complaints, so it's 13-14% when we're talking about refunds, maybe let's say 12% to be safe. Can we find any other airline as bad with refunds? And the answer is no. I've looked through the list here, and the second worst airline when we look at complaints about refunds, I found it right here with 700 complaints, and that would be Volaris Airlines. I'm not even sure who on earth they are. Closely followed by TAP, I believe the Portuguese airline, if I'm not mistaken. So we have here a very high number of complaints by Air Canada, something that I very much hope that is going to catch the attention of decision makers in the US. What I would like to ask you, especially those of you who are from the United States and who live there, or especially if you are citizens of the United States, please spend a moment on calling your congressman or congresswoman, calling your senator, and ask them, how is it possible that a foreign airline, which does lots of business in the US, is so blatantly disregarding the US law about refunds? I've already been talking about it about Canada, and we are going to come back to it very shortly, but the same principle works in the US. If sufficient number of complaints are received, not only at the DOT, but also at the various US politicians, decision makers' offices, that there is one foreign airline which outdoes all the others pretty much in terms of complaints about this issue, then I suspect that Air Canada is going to get a very unpleasant phone call, hopefully in the not too distant future. So if you are an American, if you're watching this, if you have a friend or relative who is American, ask them to do a favor to us, to help us out, and ask them to call their decision makers, to call their representatives, and complain that Air Canada is disproportionately out of line here with any other airline. The other news to report is about the formal complaints. Simon Cyr has been absolutely wonderful with his efforts to create a template and to ensure that everyone who has the energy and time and desire gets to file a US formal complaint without much effort. And I'm pasting here again the link to his templates just so that you will have access to it. And I suggest, of course, that you continue filing those formal complaints as well. Air Canada has been extremely combative with those complaints. We have seen already some of their responses. They are challenging everything possible that they can on Earth, everything that about jurisdiction, about the person has no interest, about US should not impose laws on Canadian airlines, everything that you can imagine they are trying to do. The fact that there are so many complaints itself will draw some attention from US authorities, hopefully, to this issue. We have seen WestJet already starting to see the light, and I don't think that WestJet began to issue refunds out of the goodness of its heart. I believe WestJet began to issue refunds for US flights because they were told that there will be consequences otherwise. So with Air Canada, they are of course a larger corporation, and they have a long combative history of combative attitudes. So with Air Canada, we will have to work harder, but keep up the work. The work that you have already put into this is showing. I was doing it just the other day, a head count of how many complaints, formal complaints we have, and it seems that at this point, the formal complaints from Canada is occupying at least a quarter of the complaints, of the formal dockets with the US DOT since the beginning of the year. Let me repeat that. As far as I can see, and I don't know, of course, how things will develop over time, but when you look at the formal filings, the first complaint, which was by Simon Cyr, a third-party complaint, has sequential number 53. Now we are up to close to 80 or 79. And most of those figures, not all of them, but the vast majority between 53 and 79 or 80 are from our group. So keep up the pressure, keep filing formal complaints against Air Canada. I also hope that Simon Cyr will be able to perhaps incorporate some of the arguments that Air Canada has been putting forward already and immediately shoot them down already in the complaint. But this is a worthwhile effort, and it will eventually have a result. What we are seeing overall, and that's I want to flag again, is we are seeing gradual step-by-step changes. It is, you know, in a Hollywood movie, it would be a nice victory when a judge declares or jury declares that Air Canada, WestJet, Swoop, all those airlines are all did something horrible and they should be committed to jail for it, or the CEOs, and there's a big Canadian flag in the background. But that's not how things happen in real life, unfortunately. So it seems that we are inch by inch gaining ground. Just keep up the pressure. If you think that any of this would have happened without each one of you who's listening and whose friends are listening and to whom you are talking, doing your part, you would be wrong. This is not the result of a single person's pressure. I alone could not have achieved this without your help and without your constant pressure. And this brings me to the related topic, which is keep calling your members of parliament. They need to hear an earful from you. If you go to the House of Commons website, you can find the contact information for each one of your MPs, each MP. So if you are in a riding, you can find out what is your riding. There's Elections Canada website for that. You can then find who is your MP. You can find their phone number, their email address, and don't just email, because emails are easy to answer. They can have a template and just send it back to you, get their staff to do it. That's not efficient. Email them and ask them, I want to speak to you. I want to have a teleconference with you. I would like to explain to you why the government's position is wrong and how it needs to be fixed. And if they give this kind of template answer, boilerplate answer, well, this is the problem for the Canadian Transportation Agency or for the government to solve, don't accept it. If they are members of the government, the Liberal MPs, they need to hear from you why the government policy is wrong. If they are in the opposition, They even more need to hear from you why the government policy is wrong and also how it needs to be fixed. The old saying, the old wisdom is that the squeaky wheel gets oiled. You need to be that squeaky wheel. You need to keep up the pressure, constantly emailing, phoning, asking to meet with MPs, asking to speak to them. The MPs have to understand that this is a burning issue for you. This is not just a minor issue that some people, a group of fringe people care about. This is something that affects everybody who flies. It affects all of us, and there are many people who fly. There are, according to our calculations, millions of affected passengers, and the MPs have to hear your voice. They have to hear from you as their voter, you as their constituent, that this needs to be fixed. And Ursula is asking, how do passengers who have received a refund keep up the pressure? There are a number of ways to keep up the pressure. First, you can still make a video to explain how long it has taken for you to get your money. It's a short video, but explain that instead of simply being given a refund, I had to do this and I had to do this, and I waited 2 months, and I posted 57 tweets and spoke to 77 people. I'm just giving you numbers, but the fact that this should not be so hard is a message that you also want to put out there. It's a message that is worth communicating. And you can still speak to your member of parliament about the fact that this issue remains unresolved in Canada. So it's not simply a question of whether you got back your money. Your neighbor didn't get back your money. Your friends in the Facebook group didn't get back their money. And there is a whole system that seems like airlines can write their own laws. That's absurd. One of the basic tenets of democracy is that laws are being made by the parliament and only by parliament. I cannot sit down here and write a law, hang it on my door and say, well, sorry, but my policy is different. And apparently we start living in a world that becomes more visible that airlines can say with a straight face that, well, that's the law, but our policy is different. We made a different policy. And they are not immediately being let out in handcuffs from the room after they made such a statement. The very thought that there is one law for large corporations and another law for the average Joe is a fundamental problem, that even if you didn't travel, even if you got your refund, you can and you should raise with your member of parliament. Equality before and under the law is a basic fundamental tenet of Canadian democracy. And those large corporations are undermining that, not on the basis of racial concern or sex or family status or color, which is a typical grounds for discrimination, but it seems that those airlines and other large corporations want a society where the large corporations, have different laws for themselves than the passengers and then the consumers in general. That has to be stopped. And this is a very good time for getting that message across, that there is one law for everybody. Everybody has to comply with contractual principles. Everybody has to comply with the basic fundamental principle that if you didn't get the services you had paid for, you get back your money. And so I'm just looking at my cheat sheet here. When you are dealing with your MP and their office, first, be quite pushy about speaking to them. Maybe it will be in a week or two that they can find time to you, but without being too much in their face, make it clear to their staff that the MP is getting their salary from your taxes. They are being hired by Canadians to represent you, so they have to speak to you. And if they are really stonewalling you, start asking pointed questions like, are you saying I cannot speak to my own MP? Are you preventing me from speaking to my own MP as a Canadian citizen whom I voted? And if there are a few trouble spot MPs, well, perhaps you can complain to the party leader or party whips or other MPs from the same party. Don't take no for an answer. And there are some great answers to the airlines are poor argument, which is passengers are poor too. It is not only airlines that need the money desperately. Passengers who paid money and they receive no services also need the money as much as airlines do. Last topic for today, which is of course our usual topic, is chargebacks. We always talk about this. I'm seeing some improvement at Rogers MasterCard. That's a positive sign. Walmart MasterCard seems to remain a kind of trouble spot. I'm aware of at least one case where they even refuse to give any documents and they're just saying, no, we won't even talk to you properly. So that is being handled, and I'm hoping that Walmart MasterCard is going to have an earful of chat with MasterCard International. The major trouble spot now is American Express. We are constantly working on that issue, and I have some ideas for next week. I also have some ideas that, depending on what happens next week, may be a good way of sending a warning to all credit card companies that they may be facing consequences if they don't follow the law. But with American Express and any credit card which is trying to skirt its obligation to issue chargebacks, to deal with the refunds, to deal with the disputes, the ultimate solution, if they are really stonewalling you, is refuse to pay your credit card bill. Precisely, refuse to pay the legitimate charge on the bill. So if they charge you $1,000 for a flight you never received, you claw it back from the next bill and refuse to pay and put into writing what you're doing. So you're not just becoming delinquent in not paying without saying a word. That would be a bad idea. But don't pay and put into writing and send a letter, possibly a fax, possibly even a registered letter, to the credit card company that you don't accept that charge. It's an illegitimate charge, and therefore you will not be paying for it nor interest on it. You need to remember that the money in your credit card is a loan, is a kind of demand, is a debt that they claim you have. But just because I tell you, you know, I think you owe me $10,000, doesn't mean you have to pay me. Doesn't mean just because I utter the words that you need to pay me $10,000 imposes no obligation on you. What does impose obligations on you is the law, is the contract. One of the basic tenets of any kind of contractual relationship is consideration. Having someone pay for something without receiving any consideration is always a suspect in the eyes of the law. And in your cases, where you receive no services in return for your hard-earned money, there is a very good argument there that there was nothing to be paid for. So your debt is legitimately being disputed. And in Ontario, for example, if you have a disputed debt and you communicate it to your credit card company and this is disputed, and you tell them, you know what, take me to court. They cannot take further enforcement action, further collection actions against you. That's what the Ontario regulations say on collection agencies and collecting debt. So I would like to be clear that I'm not suggesting it to be punitive and refuse to pay the bill altogether, the entire credit card bill. That's not right. I would urge you to pay every charge which is legitimate, because we are lawful citizens. We are law-abiding citizens. But any charge which is not legitimate, you have every right to refuse to pay it as long as you follow the proper procedure. You send them information about the dispute, to provide them documents for dispute, and if they don't budge, then you just claw it back. And again, send a letter telling, I'm not paying this amount. This is a disputed charge. I don't recognize this valid. I don't believe I owe this amount, and therefore I won't be paying it. And then the credit card is left with the option of to take you to court. The more people will choose this route, the harder it will be for credit card companies to deal with it, and the harder it will be for them to let airlines get away with it. Because bear in mind, this is the problem of musical chairs. The music has stopped. There are three players, the airline, you, and the bank, but there are only two chairs. So each player wants the passengers to not be able to find a seat. The best way is for the passengers, you, to force the bank to hold the bag by not paying if they are refusing to deal with the chargeback. because then the bank will have no choice but to go to the airline and say, well, look, we have here 50 of our customers who all refuse to pay your charge. They're paying everything else. They have been paying all their bills for the past 20 years, but your charge they refuse to pay. And then the bank and the merchant will have to reach some settlement. There is no practical way for a bank to take hundreds of people to small claims court over relatively small amounts. It will be uneconomic for them and it will bog down the courts. They know that as well. And they cannot do collection action against you if you tell them clearly, take me to court. I'm now going to answer some questions because we are getting close to our target of 1 hour. Scott Friars is asking, hello from Nova Scotia. My WestJet tariff has a force majeure clause that mentions that they will not guarantee flights nor be held liable. Am I correct in assuming that the force majeure clause only relates to compensation claims and not to actual refund? Has there ever been a ruling that clearly shows that relation between a force majeure event and not refunding tickets? So, Scott, there are a couple of answers to this. Force majeure is always about damages for not being able to perform, not about getting back your money. If you bought your ticket online, then the Nova Scotia Consumer Protection Act, Section 21AF, provides you a right to a chargeback. And if you look at the regulations for internet sales contracts in Nova Scotia, then it will also specifically deal with travel services which are not being delivered on the time, on the day where they were supposed to be delivered. So unfortunately, Nova Scotia is quite explicit about this if it is an online transaction. And in terms of a ruling, there are 4 rulings from the Canadian Transportation Agency before they became corrupt and the airline's mouthpiece that confirm the right of passengers to a refund regardless of the cause for the cancellation. What matters is that the passenger was not contributing in any way to the cancellation of their travel. It was the airline that canceled, not the passenger. It doesn't matter whether it was within or outside the airline's control, you have to get a refund. So those force majeure provisions, they don't say what the airlines claim they say, and if it went to court, the court will not enforce it because the Consumer Protection Act in most provinces are very clear, and they do take precedence over a contract. One of the major provisions in a Consumer Protection Act is that it cannot be contracted out. A Consumer Protection Act that you can contract out, that the airline can put in some kind of language there that this act doesn't apply, is not good. So in Ontario, I remember it by heart, is Section 7 sub 1 of the Ontario Consumer Protection Act, which provides for the provision that the rights under the Consumer Protection Act cannot be contracted out. The merchant cannot put in whatever they put in actually there doesn't mean that the law doesn't apply. Now, Roland Wells is asking, I had flights from Ireland to Croatia and then back to Canada with KLM and Turkish Airlines. Both were cancelled. Am I correct in understanding the EU regulations require they reimburse me? And the answer is, when you have a flight from you had it from Ireland to Croatia and back to Canada. So I don't know how Turkish Airlines comes into this, by the way, but Ireland to Croatia is certainly governed by the EU rules, and they do have to refund it. KLM has been actually doing better now on that. Turkish Airlines may get very combative. Croatia has a national enforcement body. Question is how firm they are with enforcing it, actually enforcing the law. Croatia is very close to Hungary. They are much nicer than Hungary, I would say, in many ways. But Croatia is Eastern Europe. I would be very suspicious about how well they are enforcing the laws. They don't have the history of civil democracy and Canadian-style corruption that Western countries would have. So certainly with the flight from Ireland, that would be a good starting point. I would also do a chargeback if you can. Ray is asking follow-up question. Air Canada says that part of my ticket is airfare, the rest is tax. Air Canada usually said only airfare can be refunded. This Air Canada is clearly misleading you. If your flight is cancelled, everything has to be refunded. In fact, taxes can be refunded even when the fare itself is not refundable, because taxes go to third parties. An airline cannot pocket it because they would be then enriching themselves unlawfully and justly. Diane is asking, I initiated chargeback in April and was told that Air Transit had 45 days to respond dispute. After 60 days approximately, I asked you a few weeks ago about the credit on my card. You told me to pull it and put it on my account. It has now been 100 days and I haven't heard anything. Can I assume this dispute is resolved? Diane, I would say if you want to be 100%, call your credit card company and ask them what's going on with it. But I would treat it as resolved for the following reason. If they come back with some documents, I would file a rebuttal and refuse to pay back the money which is already at safety in your bank account. So once you have the money in your bank account, practically it's over, because they have no way of getting that money back from you short of suing you in court. And that's the mindset you have to be. I realize that you have been all raised for decades to think, oh my God, I always have to pay my credit card bills, which is true if it is a valid transaction. There is no reason for you to pay an invalid transaction, whatever the credit card company may think. They think it's valid, you think it's not valid. Who is going to decide? A judge. And I still have a few questions, but then probably we're going to wrap things up. I believe, Scott is asking, I believe the exception made to the APPR by the CTA were supposed to expire at the end of June. Any news of an extension of this status? Scott, you're asking an excellent question. I haven't been checking the CTA's decisions in the past few days. So if you remind me about it, perhaps over PM, or just post a question about it, I can certainly research that, what is available. Their website of decisions is all public. I have don't remember seeing anything there all of a sudden about this. And I'm curious to see, of course, what they will make out of it. Very, very good question. Certainly, if they try to extend it, there are lots of questions about its legality. So we will be looking at it very, very, very closely. In one more question I'm seeing here is by Miriam Doyland. My MasterCard or Walmart card told me it will take up to 30 days to transfer my credit to my bank account, even though it is not disputed and actually came through the airline ahead of the chargeback process, which is incredibly slow with this credit card. Does this sound reasonable, or am I being led on? They tried to convince me to leave the credit on my account, but I said no. Miriam, my instinct would be to, I don't think this 30 days sounds right at all to me. My instinct with the Walmart credit card would be to somehow spend it down, maybe take some cash advances if you have a positive balance. So they cannot charge you interest if they owe you money and you take it out with a cash advance. I'm not sure how cash advance works, but I would even consider incurring the expense of a machine charge of $1 or whatever it is at a machine to every day take out whatever amount you can, $500 on a cash advance, until your balance comes down to zero. I would, with a Walmart MasterCard, some other member of the group had a bad experience, which we are currently looking more closely, and I would not trust them as far as I can throw them based on their behavior. I sent them already an email and they are not responding. So MasterCard in general is quite nice, but Walmart MasterCard, something doesn't smell right there. So I would be very, very cautious, would not trust them at this point. Maybe they will come around and this was just all a misunderstanding, but I am not liking what I'm hearing. So we are now a little bit over 1 hour, and I'm not seeing any more questions here in the queue. So unless my team will tell me that there's still more questions, we are going to very shortly wrap things up. So team, how are we doing? And any other questions, anything that needs to be answered? And I'm seeing here one question by Ayai Kumar. Do you have a generic email that we can send to the MP? No, write your own email, come up with your own words. And I'm just wondering, any questions? We're, I think, close to being done, but we are good to wrap up. Okay, so thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Christine, for another week that has passed, and we'll have many more weeks. We will report back to you either in 1 or 2 weeks, depending on whether there are big or small developments to report. This was certainly a packed session. Don't forget the videos. Be in touch with Jeffrey Reichman, and let's keep up the fight. We are going to win. It may take some time, it may take some effort, but obviously the law and justice is on our side. Have a wonderful week.